Hearthstone Classic was released on March 25th, 2021. It's a mode where players can experience Hearthstone as it was first released back in June 2014. So since the mode's release, what happened to it? Well, I played and streamed the mode from the time it was released up until early this year, so I've got a pretty solid timeline of how things went. In the first couple seasons, it was obvious the mode wasn't going to explode. People came to revisit a mode that they remembered upon beginning their Hearthstone journey, and they were hit with a wave of nostalgia. Control Warrior, Miracle Rogue, Combo Druid, Zoo, all the classic archetypes were back, for better or for worse, and players could experience a meta that they hadn't had in years. This nostalgia was a huge driving factor. I heard from plenty of players who decided to return to the mode, but it wasn't the main reason that they stuck around. Many players felt the same thing that I felt. This mode wasn't just a wave of nostalgia, it was actually pretty damn good. A hell of a lot better than what Standard had become anyway. There were limited RNG effects, simple to follow cards, interesting deck building options which were also cheap to craft, and there was a fairly balanced, albeit imperfect meta. In the coming months, this led to two types of players. Those who got their fun out of experiencing that nostalgia, who just left the mode, and then those that got sucked right back into it just like they did when the game was first released. I was in that second camp and got to meet tons of others who were as well. Having a smaller player base wasn't the best for queue times, but it did bring an interesting dynamic where most of the players who stuck with the mode were actually pretty hardcore about it. Around this time, things had stagnated a bit. My stream was tiny, but I was one of the only people who was actually streaming the game. I'd play some goofy off-meta decks, try suggestions from viewers, but the overall meta was largely unchanged from what it originally was. That wasn't until Carlotto created the Hearthstone Classic Discord. Unlike my personal Discord, which was and still is largely unorganized and, well, rarely used, this server was put together in a really thoughtful manner that grew and evolved over time, drawing more serious players who wanted a place to discuss the intricacies of the mode. Through this server and my time streaming, I saw the Classic community start to grow. The growth was small and gradual, but fairly steady, and with that came changes to the meta through community-driven discussion. This turned into community-run tournaments where people would showcase new and interesting archetypes, some of which were more suited for the tournament setting, but others that could be run on ladder. Myself and other community members would then highlight some of the most interesting lists, and players began to see a real shift in the decks that would pop up on ladder. There was also this interesting side effect of having such a dedicated community, because players were constantly facing opponents that they would know through Discord, maybe from tournaments, or possibly stream chat. Honestly, the whole thing felt kind of magical, where everyone sort of knew everyone else who played the game, even the real pieces of shit out there, and it was all driven through community initiatives surrounding this obscure game mode. Now, in the background, there was a real problem brewing, and it was only getting worse. What was that problem? Bots. Everyone who played the mode was intimately familiar with bots, though everyone seemed to have their own unique experiences and impressions of them. Those bots were largely playing Zoo, as it's an easy to craft and pilot deck with a pretty high win rate for even the worst of bots. These bot accounts would farm gold, and then the accounts would be sold for real money. And the bot problem got so bad in Classic that bots were getting created to then counter those original bots. You now had anti-Zoo warrior bots that were specifically designed to win against Zoo bot decks, and then those decks would hit Legend easily because of it. And then that turned into this whole meta where players always had to consider the prevalence of bots when they were choosing their decks, and people were just often playing hard counters to Zoo until they could climb to Legend, and then try to avoid the bots after that. I even ended up making videos with suggestions of how to counter bots, and it really just became an unfun slog that every player had to go through every single season reset. Frustration mounted against these bots. Was Blizzard gonna do anything about them? they seem easy to detect, so why not handle the problem? Well, the answer was no, at least not yet. They eventually introduced reporting functionality, and surely with that, the problem would be dealt with. Well, guess what? The answer was still no. It was frustrating to say the least, as the solution was staring them in the face, but it felt like reporting bots would send your message straight to Blizzard's junk mail. While these frustrations were growing, the player base also had a number of ideas about what the mode should become. Some players wanted it to stay exactly as it was. Others wanted to see balance changes get introduced to weaken some of the stronger decks in the mode, while others wanted to see the introduction of some of the older expansions, like Naxx. That last option was teased a number of times. AMAs regarding the game would usually touch on it in some way, either saying the mode was very likely to be updated to include these older sets, or that some new game mode would be introduced with older sets being rotated every now and then. For players who wanted to see some degree of change, this communication was encouraging. There was likely no solution that was going to make everyone happy, but some small change would surely inject life into the community. And so days passed, then weeks, months, years, nothing. Blizzard did nothing. No changes, no announcements, no bot bans. Blizzard did nothing to help the game mode thrive. The community did their part. Streaming, videos, articles, self-funded tournaments, endless discussion and theory crafting. There was an enthusiasm that was impossible to snuff out despite Blizzard's lack of effort to inject anything into their own game. And that brings us to today. Blizzard finally announced the end of Hearthstone Classic as a game mode. So what's it being replaced with? Well, it's nothing I heard the Classic community ask for. It is a rotating set like some people were looking for, but at least to start, it doesn't include the older sets that came right after Classic. From the chatter I've seen so far, I don't think many Classic players are going to take part in the mode, unless at some point it ends up rotating back to those older sets. Now that sounds like a depressing end to the game mode. But there's something really positive I want to highlight in all this. You see, Blizzard is doing what almost every AAA developer does nowadays. They're chasing money. Long gone are the days of old Blizzard where they'd hold back on releases until they had a finished product that they were really proud of. Other developers are much the same though, it's not just them. I mean, how many games can you think of in recent years from AAA developers that were total flops? It's honestly harder to come up with a list of enjoyable games. The thing is, we already knew this was the case. This move comes as no surprise to anyone. It's clear as day that gamers can't rely on large developers to make decisions in their best interest, and that isn't going to change anytime soon. But when we look back at the lifespan of Classic, where did the fun really come from? It's admittedly a fun game mode, but all Blizzard did was re-release it. The fun came from the community. Twitch chat, YouTube videos, YouTube comments, Discord discussions and suggestions, self-hosted tournaments within the community. I mean, forget the game, there are tons of people in this community who are smart, funny, interesting, you name it. The most fun always came from things that were community-backed. So is Hearthstone Classic going away? Sure. But the people who make up the community aren't. So what does the future look like with a community of Hearthstone Classic lovers and no game to share? I don't know, but I do know that there's more value in preserving that community even without the game mode than there is in just throwing it away. Maybe there's still Classic hosted tournaments within the community, even if some of the cards get changed. Maybe it's an opportunity to explore other custom tournament rule sets. Maybe friendly matches replace the ladder, or the community builds their own seasonal ladder. Who knows? Maybe it's not even about Hearthstone for some people. Ask each other for game recommendations. I mean, indie developers are still awesome. Go find a group to play Dungeons & Dragons with, or Artifacts, because it's better. Stream something. Develop something. I don't care what it is, but keep your chin up and find what makes you happy. Even if that means you get involved in other communities outside of here, just remember it's you people that made Hearthstone Classic awesome, and it's you people that will make whatever your next interest is awesome. I understand it's a disappointing time for a lot of people right now, but I have tons of optimism for everyone who's been heavily involved in Classic. The chapter of Hearthstone Classic as a game mode may be gone, but that just means it's the start of a new chapter for a lot of you. Don't wait for some developer to bring you that next chapter. Be proactive. Get into Discord, find some people in the same boat as you, and go make something fun.